Climb into the cockpit with pilot and Link Square's Chief Legal Officer, Tim Parilla, as he invites legal leaders aboard to share advice that will help you navigate even the most turbulent times of in-house counsel work. We'll cover a range of topics from data privacy to legal team structure to public company transactions and beyond. You don't want to miss this series. Fasten your seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. You're listening to Cockpit Counsel.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cockpit Counsel. Today with me, I have Danielle Maglente, who's the Director of Compliance at Plum Voice. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about your role.
Sure. So I moved to Boston for law school about 10 years ago. The reason I decided to go to law school is because my parents basically forced me to go.
Okay.
I liked it when I was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was funny. When I was about 9, I remember my dad saying, "Oh, you should probably go to law school because you're good at debating with me at home." And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And you're a pretty good student, so it might be a good path to go down. And now, in looking back, I feel like it didn't really make sense for him to push me down that path for those reasons, because I don't think I'd ever want to be a litigator. I think that sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
And there are no lawyers in my family, so what my parents knew about the legal profession was just kind of based on what they saw on TV or in movies.
Right.
But I just did what they said, and I decided to go down that path. And when I got to law school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had this vague idea that maybe I wanted to work in intellectual property or do entertainment law because I am a creative myself and I wanted to work in that space. Mm-hmm. But then that ended up not happening.
Right.
I ended up working in compliance and healthcare at first, and now I'm in tech doing compliance.
Where did you move from?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And what kind of creative side to you do you have?
I like to sing.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been singing since I was 4.
That's awesome. What kind of stuff?
I like to do R&B, like Etta James, Gladys Knight stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very, very cool.
Thanks.
But yet here you are in compliance world.
Yeah.
So walk me through that journey a little bit and how you found yourself ultimately now at Plum.
So I was doing compliance at a healthcare company before Plum. What got me to compliance in the first place is I did a compliance internship in my second year of law school, and I actually really liked it. I didn't know anything about the compliance world before I did so, but since I liked it so much, I kept it in the back of my mind as a possible career choice. And then the real catalyst for pushing me towards compliance after law school was I didn't pass the bar exam the first time I took it. And so I decided to do compliance because I liked the work, and then also keep the possibility of doing something more traditional in mind.
Yep.
So I worked towards continuing to study for the bar, and eventually I passed the bar, but I still really enjoyed compliance.
Yeah.
So now I don't know if I would ever leave this world.
So what did you find that you really liked about compliance? What took hold of you there and made you say, this is what I want to do from a career standpoint?
Well, I like that in different environments, you're exposed to a world that is not legal. I liked that when I worked at a healthcare company, I was really exposed to the healthcare space in a way that I wasn't exposed to even taking a health law class. And I like that in tech, it's completely different from anything I ever studied. I have no tech background at all. Yeah. And so being able to work with people that see things through a different lens is really interesting. Yeah. And I really feel like I learn something new every day because I don't understand half of the things that the engineers are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've found that's been the most rewarding part of working in tech startup. Basically my entire career has been in tech startups. I was fortunate enough to never have to work at a law firm. But sort of the other side of that is I had to learn as I go as kind of a crash course.
Yeah.
But working with different professionals in tech has been amazing. Everything from the way that engineering teams are structured and product teams are structured and how that can vary from organization to organization and even from project to project, or type of work that they're doing has been really, really fascinating. It's been a ton of fun to learn just enough to be dangerous, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But it also, and and I'd love to hear your take on this. I've found that it's been wildly helpful in understanding what my role is within an organization, is to really understand, some of the complexities that your tech people, your product people, even your marketing and sales folks, what some of those struggles are, and how they can utilize the assistance of a compliance team, or they actually have to build within a regulatory framework or a legal framework that compliance can help construct for them. Mm-hmm. Knowing more and more about the struggles of their day in and day out and what their responsibilities are, I've found has been really, really helpful in providing more actionable guidance to those types of teams. But would love to hear your perspective on how getting to know those different disciplines has helped you move your career in compliance forward.
Yeah, I think when I think about how we're all working towards one big goal and sometimes a couple of big goals, it helps me see the importance of really understanding what the roadblocks are from the engineering team and the sales team. Yeah. So I try to take compliance a step further from just telling them what we need to do and understanding what it means on the implementation side. So sometimes I'll say, can you whiteboard like what you're actually doing in the system? Right. So I get a high level understanding, and I feel like that helps me show them that I care about the time that it's taking for them to implement things. And then that helps them not get so mad at me when I say, okay, we need to do this thing. We need to make this system secure to comply with the regulations. And I know it's going to stop some of your priorities for a little while, but it just helps us have a more fluid relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. So your first compliance role was in a healthcare company, and Plum is not in the healthcare space, right?
Yeah.
So how has that change been for you, going from what I can only assume, because I've never worked in the healthcare or biotech space, I can only assume that's a relatively rigid compliance framework. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And with Plum Voice, do you have a similarly rigid framework or not so much? How are those two sort of industries different, and how does that make your approach to your job change?
I think it's a little bit less rigid in that there were more standards and laws and regulations that I had to know and kind of move around. It made it really hard to transition from healthcare, where I really focused just on HIPAA,
yep,
to a tech space where I had to know about PCI, payment card industry, and SOC 2, ISO 27001, and now GDPR. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to learn all of these regulations, learn how to communicate them to the engineers, learn how to implement all of these things. So there was a huge learning curve.
Right.
And I think I spent a lot of time after work just trying to grasp these laws and regulations. Mm-hmm. So it was quite hard to transition.
I would imagine so. So did you have a decent amount of outside counsel you could rely on? Did you do a lot of your own research, a little bit of both? How did you really work toward becoming proficient and developing that expertise and all these various certifications?
When I started out, it was a lot of work on my own. I read a lot of blogs. Yeah. I listened to podcasts. I joined a book club for compliance. Yes, it was a lot of just me trying to figure things out on Google and with whatever resources I could find. Eventually, my boss was more open to sending me out on trainings, so I was able to learn from other people, but definitely leaned on myself a lot in the beginning.
Yeah, and I would imagine there, particularly in Boston, there are probably some decent community groups that you can get involved in, mm-hmm. like people in tech compliance that meet on a regular basis can be a resource.
Yeah, for sure.
So how big is your team now?
So I actually looked at our org chart this morning because I had to give it to an auditor, but we're a team of 40 people, so we're very small.
Okay. Yeah, that's the organization-wide 40 people.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's very, very small.
Yeah.
And then it's you and you have an associate as well.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. When did you free up the budget to bring on an associate, and walk me through a little bit of how you approach that conversation with your supervisor and allow you to get that resource?
Well, so I hired him in 2019. So I was working for the company for 2 years by myself before he joined.
Mhm.
And it was kind of a tough pitch I think I had to pitch it to the CEO at the time.
Yeah.
And, he was like, do you actually need somebody?
Right.
But yeah, I mentioned that it was a lot of work. At the time, he also asked me to start taking on some of the contract work as well.
Okay.
So splitting my time between compliance and contracts were very difficult for me.
Mhm.
So when I mentioned that it would be really helpful to just have someone really focus on a lot of the compliance stuff to free up some of the time to work on contracts, he was okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what that's really interesting, because now you're sitting in this intersection of, more the legal side of the world, working on contracts and interacting with the business in that way, and then you still have these compliance responsibilities. How have you found that to be, and how, if at all, are you dividing your thinking and your time between those sort of distinct but related disciplines?
I found it both difficult and exciting. In a way, the contract space feels more comfortable because I did have a little bit of practice in law school.
Yeah.
I feel like with the compliance space, everything was new.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's challenging because I think that while we learned a lot of theory in law school, we didn't know how to practically apply that.
Sure.
Especially if you didn't work in a law firm setting before in-house. It's so tough. Right. So I find myself Googling things all the time and just trying to rely on what I could find to get through that portion. But I think especially with my associate, it's been a lot easier to manage both tasks. But with dividing my time, I mean, I do a lot of time blocking in my day where I'll dedicate the afternoon to contract work, in the morning to compliance, so that the constraints really help me with balancing my work.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know you've got a smaller organization there, and I imagine everybody is doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just a super fun time to be at a tech company. I love that. Like those early stages, just a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. As far as the stakeholders that you're dealing with on a day in and day out basis, when you're dealing with contracts, are they the same stakeholders that you're working with when you're trying to implement compliance protocols, or are they completely different sets of people? Maybe some overlap.
Yeah, they're different people. There's a little bit of overlap. With contracts, I mostly work with account management and sales when I'm working on contract review and negotiations for potential partnerships.
Yep.
But I do also work with engineering, and that's where the crossover is, because with engineering, I'm helping them implement compliance, but I'm also working with them to help them navigate new features that they might want to add to our software, or if they want to add a new system to our infrastructure and somehow data is involved, then they have to talk to me to research, what kind of data is involved. Does it rise to the level of sensitive data? And then if so, what do we need to do to secure your system? So that's where the overlap is with them.
Right. And so do you find that you need to interact with the teams in a pretty different way? Like just in terms of approach, or is it pretty seamless for you?
I think it's pretty seamless. I think underneath all the different problems, everyone just has something that they want to solve, and I just give them, the legal or compliance lens. But I think even though they're all different problems, the way I approach it's the same.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So when you started out doing compliance work and working sort of with that team, when you were asked to start doing more of the contract work, how did you go about forming the relationships with those business partners on the account management team, on the sales team, and how did you sort of learn how to actually determine what's important and what's market?
It's a learning process.
Yeah.
I had already had a relationship with people on account management and sales because with our customers, sometimes they'll send us customer compliance surveys. So I worked with them on a compliance stance.
Okay.
So working with them on contracts isn't a completely new thing for me. I guess it's new content, but since the relationship was there, it's just a new question to kind of navigate. So it wasn't too tough to work with them on contracts.
Right. I've found that most of my very first job out of law school was the company's first in-house counsel at this gaming company based up in Cambridge, and had no real experience, reviewing contracts at all. And I tried to do a lot of the reading, like PLI stuff and all of that. I read as much as I could, and but I found that just sitting down and talking with the business folks, like, what's really important, like, what do you expect this vendor to do for you, and then just write it down, like, in a pretty straightforward way. It's like, all right, the company wants the vendor to deliver these 5 things. Vendor must deliver items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Just list them out, and kind of go from there. But I ended up learning a lot about how the business can teach you what's important in a contract and what's not, and that's something that I've carried with me throughout my entire career. And I found that building those relationships has just been absolutely essential to my success as a lawyer, almost even more so than my legal ability, which has been an interesting realization.
Yeah, was that intimidating for you at first?
It was, but I had a lot of support. So I was brought into the role because the company was trying to sell itself to, the parent company was trying to sell this division to another company in the gaming space, and I was brought in to do, to help with due diligence and that sort of thing. And so, like, during that process, I was working closely with our outside attorneys who were representing us in the deal, which was fine. But then that deal kind of stalled, and there was nothing to do. But my boss, who was the COO at the time, said, why don't you go and talk to the chief marketing officer? He's doing different types of contracts. Go see if he's got anything for you to take a look at. And a lot of what was going on was different types of marketing and branding deals that were for events, distribution, advertisement outside of the United States. Most of it was across Europe. And so before me joining the company, it was literally just, Bill being like, yeah, this looks good, and signing it, right? And I mean, Europe is a much less litigious society than what we deal with here in the United States, right? So they're like, yeah, well, whatever, sign it, and we'll just manage the relationship, and hopefully we don't have to sue anybody over any contracts, right? And even if we do, it's a different process, and whatever. So having me come in and fumble around with it really, like, was like, well, it's not going to make it any worse, arguably, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of was working within that to a certain extent, and but then over time, I think what that did for me was actually provide a lot of confidence. Is at the end of the day, like, there are a lot of people that will go through a law firm environment doing commercial transactions, doing brand licensing deals, and they get used to seeing, like, what is boilerplate. And they get used to seeing, like, this is market, and indemnification clauses should be written like this, and limitations of liability and categorical exclusions of damages should be written in this way or that way. And they don't always internalize exactly why. But when you're going through and you don't have, like, sort of the strength of a law firm or a partner saying, well, that's what it should be, and it should be that way because of whatever, either because that's how we've always done it, that's market, or because we don't want those damages there. But to actually have to go through and say, all right, every word is here for a reason, and I need to figure out what that reason is. And you're reading sort of the academic papers behind it, right? And to a certain extent, reading some case law around like, why do you have different types of disclaimers and different types of agreements that may or may not be enforceable, and so on and so forth. And so like actually doing that work yourself, much like what you've done with compliance, I did after hours, to try to learn like, okay, what's the best way to, think about this provision, that provision. And it just, when you do the work yourself, it brings confidence and it brings a depth of understanding, I think, that sometimes can be glossed over given the high volume of work and the high pressure that a lot of law firms can bring on associates.
That makes so much sense.
So,
yeah.
But I mean, there were a lot of times where it was not as fun, but
yeah.
So, but yeah, it's, I think learning by doing like that and having the opportunity to fail as well is an interesting one. I remember the first contract that I wrote that I litigated, and that was a learning experience, right? Thankfully I wasn't the one in court litigating, but had to hire lawyers to litigate a contract that
that sounds scary.
Yeah, it's something else. It was a fine outcome, but you learn a lot for sure. So from a career trajectory perspective, like you're sitting now at this sort of the head of this both legal function and compliance function. How are you thinking about where you want to drive your career and where you want to move your focus? Like obviously you have a drive and a passion for the compliance side, right?
Yeah.
But doing more of the contract review stuff now, sort of more of that side of the legal world, is that something that's interesting for you to move into, and then obviously just sort of keeping your arm around compliance, or is it the other way around, right? Is it let someone else deal with that and give me this compliance piece? Yeah,
to be honest, I am really interested in that world of contracts and a more legally, like a traditional legal role. But I think I'm honestly kind of scared of jumping into something where it's just legal, or it's just an in-house counsel role and there's no compliance, because I wonder about my experience with it here at Plum. I don't know how it compares to any other place where someone is just focusing on contracts and other in-house counsel work. So it feels like it's going to be totally new territory if I decide to go down that way.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the good thing that I would say is you haven't learned any really bad habits from other in-house legal operators yet that you'd have to break. But I will say that operating it as an in-house lawyer is very much experience, right? And it's doing what you're doing right now. Right. And I think that you should absolutely be confident that, certain things that have worked for you at Plum are going to work for you at other tech companies. Right. And on Cockpit Counsel, we talk a ton about building relationships. Right. What is the first thing that you do when you go into an organization as the first in-house legal hire, or even as the first compliance hire? You're building the right relationships, and you're trying to identify, all right, what are the biggest areas of concern, and how can I help support people who are focused on those areas of concern? And if there's no one focused on it, who should I get to be a partner and an ally so that we can go and try to shore things up? Right. Other than that, I would say most all of the legal work you can figure out as you go along.
Yeah.
Right? And especially if you're relying on outside counsel for stuff, almost any organization that you come into is going to have existing outside counsel that have done something for the most part, right? Like at Plum, how do you interact with outside counsel?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed over the years. At first, for the first maybe 4 years that I was working there, the CEO was directly communicating to outside counsel, and then contracts would get filtered down to me sometimes. Now, as of maybe 2 months ago, the CEO has asked outside counsel to directly communicate with me.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So that's a new thing that I'm navigating.
That's excellent, and that's a big part of practicing in-house. I mean, from my perspective, I think you just embrace it and you say, yeah, like maybe it's a little bit intimidating, but you figure it out day in and day out, and it's obvious that what you've done so far has been successful and has allowed you to develop and grow. If not, then why would your CEO be giving you more responsibility?
Yeah, true.
So, also, you have your own podcast. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's. Tell us what do you talk about, and what's your vision for, and what's it called?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Small Tech, Big Compliance.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there I have a co-host, my friend. He's a network engineer.
Okay.
And we talk about small companies and their challenges when trying to meet their compliance and cybersecurity goals.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we've talked about and we want to talk about is how companies can start working towards certain compliance certificates, and then also how to actually implement secure software.
Okay.
And then we hope to talk to people from software companies that sell software solutions that can help automate a lot of the manual compliance processes as well.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
And how you're relatively early on. You've had just a couple of episodes so far?
Yeah, just 2.
That's good. That's awesome. How are you coming up with different ideas? And is it just more ad hoc, like, you wouldn't believe what happened to me at work today, let's go talk about it, or is it which honestly is a lot of fun to listen to?
Yeah. I think that's how it started.
Yeah.
But I basically write down everything that comes up when we talk for fun.
Okay.
But now I definitely dedicate some time every week to just sit and write down some ideas that we could potentially talk about. So it's a little bit structured.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. So as far as, and switching gears a little bit, as far as any advice that you have for maybe people just coming out of law school or in their first couple of years out of school who may want to get into compliance, what are some words of wisdom that you can give to those people who are looking to pursue a career?
I think that it's definitely beneficial to hear about the stories of other people that have actually taken that path, so you can get a glimpse of what it might be like if you decide to take on a compliance role.
Okay.
I think if you're starting out, definitely take some time, unfortunately sometimes nights and weekends, to wrap your head around the regulations and see what's applicable to your company, see what certifications they might not already have that might be beneficial in the future. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's also really helpful to take time to talk to people outside of the compliance team to learn about ways that compliance could benefit them, see what roadblocks they might face in their day-to-day, so that if you need to work with them, you can be thoughtful about how you share, bad compliance news or
right.
things like that. Yeah.
That's great advice. That's awesome. And I got Alyssa waving at us here. We've got some questions from the audience.
Yes. So the first one is actually on the same topic. What is your advice for legal professionals navigating compliance certifications for the first time at a new company?
Yeah. So again, try to learn about the regulation that you're trying to get the certificate in. And I think also try to learn about the people that might be involved in external audits. So, for example, I learned that when the auditors would come on site, they would sometimes have to interview engineers. And the engineers would come up to me at the end of the day and say, "Oh my God, Danielle, that was the worst thing ever. I hate talking to these outside people coming in and asking me about my processes." And so I really thought about that. And the next year, I created this mock audit situation where I would write down any potential questions that I thought an auditor might ask, and I just acted like the auditor. And I helped them prepare for these questions so that it didn't feel like a surprise when they were coming on site.
That's an excellent way to go about it. It's like doing a deposition prep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another one. How do you recommend that legal teams stay up to date on regulation changes to stay compliant? Do you have any favorite resources?
Yeah, I think, you know how you get emails about webinars?
Yeah.
I actually always try to put them in my calendar if I don't have a conflicting meeting.
Okay.
So I think they're really useful for getting information. Sometimes I'll listen to them in the background just to get some nuggets.
Right.
Aside from that, I also listen to a lot of podcasts. And then that book club that I mentioned, there's a compliance book club called 7 Elements Book Club.
Okay.
And I think when you talk to people in the space, sometimes new regulations come up all the time. So that's a really good way to keep informed as well.
Great. And then one more. What are the biggest things on your mind in 2023? What's at the top of your priority list?
The top of my list right now is wrapping my head around GDPR. I know that it's not new, but I have a bigger role in understanding it and implementing it now at my company. So that's huge on my list. And then the other thing is just enhancing preparedness. I really want to double down on disaster recovery and security threats with our engineers. So those are the two biggest things.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining today. This has been awesome. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate it. And yeah, definitely would love to have you back on. And let's make it a point to have these conversations be a little bit more regular. So,
thank you so much.
Thanks. And if you enjoyed today's content, please feel free to like us, follow us on the socials, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.